It's not only the online trolls they're coming for, but there was recently a purge on Facebook, and this purge should send chills down everyone's spines. We saw poor Joseph Watson, Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, and several other conservative figures outright unpersoned and banned for sharing opposing views to Zuckerberg, which is basically what it is, and which makes it hard to share publicly and get your message out there when Facebook, YouTube, Twitter are the biggest tech companies out there. We should all be allowed to listen to people like Alex Jones and think for ourselves, no matter how wrong it may be. That's our individual right. And some people are celebrating the latest ban, but don't seem to realise this wasn't just a conservative ban. This targeted people on the right and the left, and will only continue. Anyone that speaks against the government with facts will ultimately face the same fate. If we won't stand up for their free speech, we may as well stand up for no free speech at all. Not only shutting down free speech, but critical thought. And anyone that talks about these people will also be banned. This isn't just a digital book burning, but people's bank accounts are being removed for having the wrong opinion. This is election meddling. This controls the political conversation people are allowed to have. This is starting to sound like the China's social credit system with the latest purge on Facebook. What do you got any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, man. It's the free speech. It's really relative to the people in power, isn't it? It's like you can address an issue about, say, radical Islam. Okay. Now you can even substantiate your claim with facts. But what people and what the left are doing, and even at the fault of some of the right, is that the way they use subjective words and the way they articulate their either criticism or concern or just blatant attack on a culture or an issue, right? It's how we articulate it. It's how we are able to solidify our argument and build it with defenses so it's almost impenetrable, because we can make good cases against a lot of these issues. But the problem is when you speak, you use the facts, but then you relate to you regard immigrants as invaders. The connotations behind invaders obviously it's hostilic, it's hostile. Like all people who that's easily interpretable as like, okay, so this person thinks that immigrants are invaders, therefore this person thinks that any person who comes here to be an immigrant has some disingenuous motive in line to invade and ultimately manifest some kind of control or overthrow of the Western civilization and its values, okay? Like, there's no doubt that people are like that, but to say that all of them are like that or address immigrants as invaders is a generalist statement. And this is where the right start going down, as they, just like the left, they address these concerns with more hostile language than more informative kind of discourse. And you can just kind of tell the difference between someone who has more of a informed and more like semantically correct, or at least semantically like a better semantical way of conveying an argument, as opposed to your moron retards like Neil Erickson, who will just say they're all invaders, mate. They're fucking all invaders. They're all the same. Like, that is people like that who give the left the fucking keys to increase censorship, to increase political correctness. It's like, they're the ones who want to enforce it, alright? They're the ones who want to enforce it, no doubt. But we are the ones giving them the ammunition and the tools to do it. Because the right, or a lot of conservatives, or just the mainstream kind of understanding with things is like, it's a lack of articulation and a lack of balance and pragmatism and rationale when it comes to addressing these arguments, and it's more based on a hostile form of discourse or dialect, and that is why the left have the case to use these dickhead extremists on the right to use them as a perfect example of why society needs to be more politically correct. But the thing is like the left, the far left too, more specifically, in their own way, they it's the same principle. Like, you know, you're right. You're a conservative. You can't talk about radical Islam, but then they can go on tirades about white Europeans and how bad we are for being white people and how bad, like it's the same. It's just the utter hypocrisy and double standards of it, man, are unfathomable. Unfathomable, yeah.
Alright, well, there's a couple more topics I wanted to get into. Let's get into this egg girl. So the latest situations regarding Scott Morrison and egg girl. Her name was Amber Page. The 24-year-old Victorian woman was charged with common assault and possessing a prohibited drug, which officers found cannabis after she was taken to the Albury police station. She allegedly egged the Prime Minister for humanitarian reasons relating to the refugees on Manus Island. This took place at a Country Women's Association meeting.
My people, when suddenly all we could see was this projectile come out his head. I'm not exactly sure whether it was thrown or
so we're just having a vision up here now.
This just outlines the attacks from the left-wing activists that the mainstream media failed to recognise. The Greens, that masqueraded as virtuous and tolerant, just can't contain themselves. She was a Green supporter. This has been an attack on Conservatives, and this was a copycat incident that was inspired from Egg Boy that egged Fraser Anning earlier this year. Egg Boy was not charged, which I found idiotic, because these politicians are supposed to be representing the nation. Arguably, a lot of them aren't doing that. But the principle still remains, and although Egg Girl was charged, we need to acknowledge the importance of principles, and regardless of positions of power, this is still classified as assault. So the Greens activist Amber Page only shows how far the Greens and their supporters are willing to go to undermine their opposition. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, it's just, no matter what side of politics you are, that's how it's always going to be, man. You have your free speech so-called absolutists on the right, and you're like, okay, well, the definition of absolutism is like the uncompromising kind of belief to a doctrine or an ideology or a form of thought or something like that. It's like no matter what, I'm an absolutist on this. So if I'm a free speech absolutist, that by definition would be, I believe in free speech irrespective of what's said or the circumstances, and I believe in the person's right to say it, even to the point I'll defend the person's right to say it. Okay, and then you ask them a question, it's like, okay, if you're the leader of this country, and that Abu al-Baghdadi, or whatever his name is, the leader of ISIS, wanted to come to Australia to do a national tour around universities to preach the Islamic State's message and talk about, the jihad and Islam and how, just the what's it called, the caliphate, and just a kind of IS ideology. It's like, if you're the leader, as a conservative leader, would you allow Baghdadi or any form of high up Islamic extremists to come to Australia to be able to do national tours at universities and talk? No, obviously not. And if they do, then they're lying, because if they're in a set of circumstances, then they wouldn't. But then the other thing is and this always gets them, okay, you're a free speech absolutist, okay, you've got a guy running around town calling you a pedophile, telling everyone that you're a pedophile. Every time you walk out the door, you get people attacking you and you've got mobs chasing you and such and such. It's like, would you defend that person's that person's right to call you a pedophile? Of course not. And then they'll say, oh, that's slander and defamation. It's like, okay, so you acknowledge that slander and defamation are involved with free speech. Then you're not a free speech absolutist. A free speech absolutist would disregard would disregard defamation and slander. They would, because that's an absolutist. irrespective of defamation and slander laws, I'm an absolutist for free speech. You should still be able to have free speech and have no consequences whatsoever on your actions. So, by that logic, then you should do nothing when someone's calling you a pedophile around town and people are bashing you to defend yourself. Nothing at all. And then the left did the same thing as well. The left like to say that they're there for free speech, they're just against hate speech. But then what's hate speech? How do they define hate speech? You know, hate speech is really anything that contradicts their extremist narrative. You know, like you say, I don't have a problem with homosexuality or LGBTQ community at all. Honestly, I'm trying to find the best way to be able to compromise to them. And what I can do at the moment is I don't think it's fair to say we've got to ban the mainstreaming of homosexual kind of sexuality and culture without saying that we should just ban the mainstreaming of all sexuality in our culture. Because yes, mainstreaming homosexuality in our culture will have an influence on the minds of people, especially when it's in a cultural set of trends now where it's like starting to get to the point it's in to be gay or trans or whatever. And
everyone can do drag. Everyone. Your mom can do drag. 1488. Oh, sorry, it was just that off track, okay? It was only $400 off. There's no genders. You can be male, female, any or none. Only U.S. people can have a bunch of made-up genders. That's not true at all. No.
It's going to definitely have an influence on... There's people who might naturally think that way, but people who might be programmed and influenced that way as they get older. And the same thing goes with, you know, the mainstreaming of normal sexualization, right? It's not too different because in the same it's still detrimental, like you said. This mainstreaming of porn and sexualization of culture makes it dissolves our sense of loyalty, our sense of commitment. Our divorce rates increasing. Relationship spans don't last anywhere near as long as they used to. People are having more and more partners than than they've ever had. Than they had fucking 30, 50, 60 years ago in the common kind of part of society. It's like it did exist then, but it's way more prevalent now. And that's, leading to the dissolution of the family unit. So if you're a conservative who believes in the unity of the family unit, in which I do as well, then you've got to accept that homosexual kind of mainstreaming of homosexual gay culture isn't the only detrimental problem to the family unit. It's the mainstreaming of all sexualization in society that is detrimental to the family unit. And we can't have it one way or the other. It's got to be both ways. I'm not against sexualization or pornography or anything like that. I just think that there needs to be control to it, and I think that we shouldn't have to have posters up, whether it's gay or sexual propaganda, straight or gay propaganda. I think sexuality needs to be kept inside the bedroom and not platformed, because I know it's a commercial gain of revenue and so many people buy into it, but that's just perpetuating the destruction of our society.